She looks like our head of security, yes? Yes, she really does. The resemblance is uncanny. She also has the same birth. The two ladies attending to her wounds abruptly stopped when they noticed Reagan stirring. Reagan tried to speak when she felt an authoritative presence enter the medical ward. Is she ready for interrogation yet? A strong voice echoed down the hall. Both nurses cringed and one spoke. She needs more time. Only woke up a second ago. She needs more time. Only woke up a second ago. If nothing's broke and she can talk, it's time. We have rules here. Both spoke in tandem, nodding. Yes, mistress, of course. Reagan's exhausted body was picked up by the two nurses, much stronger than they actually appeared. Both were clad in head-to-toe in body armor suits redesigned to look like Eastern Orthodox nun outfits. She rubbed against their armor as they easily lifted her up and brought her through the halls. It didn't chafe. It felt strong but not heavy. Reagan tried to remember her lefts and rights but was still dizzy. Maybe she'd been breathing some smoke and hadn't realized it. With the adrenaline of trying to get her children to safety. There had been quite a few rooms and at least one building transfer. The apparent head of security mistress had led her to the security office. The two battle nurses sat Reagan down in a chair, her body threatening to go limp, and let her slide out of her chair like a noodle. She somehow found the strength to sit upright, as to show what little respect her damaged body could muster. Leave, was all the mistress said, not even pointing. Both closed the door with low nods and ushered themselves out of the office, the door quietly shutting behind. Reagan barely felt air pressurize the room from it closing. Reagan tried hard to focus on the security lead but wasn't able to zone in on her face. She seemed to have slightly more specialized armor and a few patches on her shoulder. Before Reagan could focus, the interrogation began. We have lots of questions for you. First of all, whose kids are those? She said it with accusation, with conviction. Reagan knew what was expected of her, what she was supposed to say, but she was done running and done lying. Reagan mustered the angriest, most determined face she possibly could in her likely drugged and weakened state. They're mine. As Reagan scowled, she squinted, trying to focus her eyes. The lady looked about 16 years older than her. An intensity rested in her eyes like she could leap over the table and punch her in the blink of an eye. The squint was ready to be a flinch, and Reagan could not equal the security lead's gaze. Reagan's eyes wandered to find something on the desk to rest her eyes on and came to a little picture that was wallet size. It was a picture of her. Reagan looked at it for a second and passed out again. Chapter 10. Who are you? The two armored-up medical gals were back. They tried to revive Reagan, but it wasn't working. She was sick by some kind of gas fumes. She'd apparently inhaled some kind of fumes for too long as she ran the bus, combined with the toxic volcanic activity. She was carefully brought back to her medical cot and tended after. Every need met with hands that treated her as if she was one of their own. After doing a final evening security review of the city, Reagan got a visitor. Lena leaned over the unconscious Reagan and touched her own face. The two looked identical. Only Reagan was about 19 years younger. Lena tried to remember the name Reagan. It should have been familiar, but was it? A visit to Ireland popped in her head at a military base. It hurt her head to think about. Reagan stirred but didn't regain consciousness. Reagan must be her real name, Lena thought to herself. She played with the idea that it could have been a title she gave herself, overseeing the children, but the risk was way too high that she was a child trafficker. It was strictly not tolerated, so the truth must be discovered in case this was a new ploy by the cartels. Lena tried to relax her mind again to see if any memories returned, but they didn't. She wouldn't push herself again this late. It might give her a really bad headache, which could make her next to useless for nearly an entire day. Lena resolved that she would take a nap next to Reagan to see if something additional came to mind when she woke up. She scooted a cot over quietly, rested her radio up over her, checked the volume, and went to sleep. Sleep time. Lena was in junior high again, and everything was pretty much how she remembered it. A new school again, being the only foreigner with an accent nobody seemed to be particularly fond of. No girl would be her friend, no doubt, all jealous. The boys were all scared of her. It was just the way she liked it. Except one boy, of course, and she hated him the most, because he wasn't scared of her. They were in class again, and he was stupidly staring at her with his big blue eyes. His big blue stupid eyes. She hated him. He was just barely above average in the attraction department, but about 1.7 meters tall. Oops. 5'10" in height. She corrected herself. In her country, the boys were a lot taller and more handsome, but also scared of her. This boy was still staring at her. The teacher was talking, but the two didn't hear anything else in the world as they locked eyes. Lena slowly held up an unnecessarily sharp pencil and silently made a motion of gouging his beautiful, stupid eyes out. He grinned even bigger. Lena blushed, but burned with hatred in her eyes, but she wasn't sure of its direction. Some time passed as Lena tussled around and drifted into another past memory. The two were waiting for class to start. It was a few days after the first pencil scenario. "I dreamed about you last night," he awkwardly blurted out. Lena felt the pencil in her pocket, just wanting that sweet, ugly eyeball. Her mom had taught her well, murder any boy who may touch you. Lena nodded subconsciously, but accidentally nodded in real life also. The boy continued, no older than 11 or 12, with short brown hair and socially awkward in a school where there were already preteen pregnancies, people making out in the halls, and multiple deaths from the suicide revolver game. "You were wearing a beautifully sparkling red dress, your hair was down, and you looked beautiful." The pencil came out before either of them had time to think, and it rested on the boy's cheek a centimeter from his eye. The two locked in place as his eyes didn't even flinch. He looked like he could hold her forever. He loved her. She saw it, and it scared her to death. While she stood 3 or 4 centimeters higher than him, and should have the physical advantage, he was able to disarm her with his heart. She slowly withdrew the pencil, the murderous reflex leaving her eyes. She put the pencil away and shoved him, and he went flying. The longing in his eyes reflected reality, and she never saw him again. It was near the end of the school year. She wanted to reach out to him to grab his hand, to pull him back and hold him forever, but it was too late. Lena wrestled in her cot, and without much delay, a third memory popped in. The vice principal called her into the office. There was about a week left of school. It was in a portable, as the school had been going through renovations. Lena was obviously in trouble, but didn't know why. They wouldn't tell her. Neither of her parents were in there. They'd suspiciously had her leave her belongings in the front office before she went in the back. The female VP was sitting there behind her desk. She was a little older, maybe in her late 30s. Nobody really knew much about her or paid attention to her, but Lena recalled some pretty weird rumors. She'd pushed them out of her head before, but they were returning now, albeit too late. The call into the office had caught Lena off guard, so she hadn't much time to think. She assumed that was the point. Maybe if the boy had tried to talk to her one more time, she could have apologized and tried to get something out other than murderous intent. It was too late for that now, though. Him or someone else had ratted her out, and here she was. Lena left the door open to try to give herself an escape, but the admin shut the door behind her. She turned to try to open it and heard from behind her, "We hear you've been a bad girl to one of our students. It won't be tolerated." The VP was around the table and on Lena before she had a chance to react. She wrestled one hand free only to pat her pocket and have no pencil inside. Lena cursed the admin and tried to wrestle the VP off of her. Chapter 11, Dead Memories. Lena woke up, her head throbbing. It was dark out. A fleeting memory of a disgraced vice principal discarded like trash, face down in a ditch after multiple allegations of her molesting girls at a junior high school. It was summer break and there were too many obvious suspects. Law enforcement didn't bother to do anything past cursory paperwork. Lena must have finished up her last few days at that school and went to her head hurt. Lena got up and Reagan was still asleep. The nurses were looking after her, making sure she was clean. She had a fluid drip running to make sure she was hydrated. It was rigged with a mechanical timer timing the drops. Electricity had been spotty, so they learned to live without for so long that it became a habit.